Hello, and welcome. Welcome once again to the Secrets of the High Demand Coach podcast. And here with us today is yet another high demand coach in the one and only Laura Buckley, who is a former Army officer and registered dietitian. I've never seen those two in the same sentences before. And she's turned leadership consultant. She spends her days today helping leaders create more engaged and empowered teams and shift their cultures so people can thrive. Laura has extensive experience in leadership development, culture change, and organizational assessments. She works with private companies, federal agencies, and nonprofit organizations. Laura highlights a shift in workplace dynamics from command and control to leadership through personal impact to attract top talent and achieve excellent results. She dedicates herself to helping clients develop systems and strategies for success in the modern work environment. She's here with us today. Laura, I'm so excited to have you on the show. It's just like the trifecta, and an Army officer, a skilled dietitian, and a leadership consultant. How did those three worlds come together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always say my journey was very unique. I was very grateful to be able to be a dietitian in the Army. So the Army does have its own dietitians in the Army Medical Specialist Corps. And so that is where I started my career. I started my career as an Army officer practicing dietetics. And my favorite thing inside of that was learning about leadership, learning about the importance of camaraderie and trust and connection inside of our work, and also opportunities to train and develop other people. And so when I felt like I wanted to follow that path, I did leave the Army, got a master's in adult education, and then really transitioned into the leadership development space, but taking very much what I learned as an Army officer from the leadership development and the culture that I was able to work in and take that with me to transition. And I will say, the work I do and when I think about cultures where people can thrive, that's very much grounded in what
Mm.
I saw and learned as a dietitian through how people's experience in their world shapes so much of their capacity for well-being. So how
Yeah.
we create spaces where people have that capacity.
Wow, I love that. I love that. We're going to unpack a couple of those things as the episode progresses here. What I want to start with is that there's a lot of content out there about culture, right? I'd argue more than ever. In your opinion, in your experience, either despite all of that talk or maybe even because of it, um, where do we still get culture wrong?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, the thing that comes to mind first and foremost is thinking that we can create a culture with words instead of behavior. It doesn't matter really what we say about how we work or what we say about our leadership. People feel our impact. And so when we think about shaping culture, it's not enough to think through our values and to give them a definition, to
Yeah.
put things into policies and procedures. Because if we don't live by those things, if we're not
Mm.
making decisions because of our values and based in our values, if we're not following agreed upon practices, we'll probably create the opposite of what we meant to create with our culture. And so it's so important to take that honest look at our behavior, the energy that we're creating, and how that's impacting the people around us.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you could, because culture, despite all of this talk, is oftentimes really nebulous in its definition. There's a lot of folks who use the word culture and couldn't come close to a definition other than culture. So I'm wondering, like, particularly with a strong culture, how do you define that? And maybe even how does someone who's sitting there, how do they kind of take inventory or even assess the strength of their culture?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I look at is how are your people showing up? How is your
Mm.
team showing up? What kind of dynamics do you see between the people that are working with and for you? A lot of companies focus on customer success and customer outcomes, but the customer experience is directly related to the internal experience that your team is having. So we can look at what are people experiencing inside of your culture? Are they excited? Do they feel empowered? Do they take ownership for their work and feel supported inside of that? How are people building relationships? What is your turnover? Like, what is your retention rate? Like, these are
Right.
things that are actually really good indicators of strong culture.
Mm.
I think about culture as what is the experience of working here truly like? When people wake up in the morning and think about going to work, how are they feeling about the environment they're walking into? When
Yeah.
people are at happy hour talking about work, what are the people on your team saying? Because
Yeah.
those are the things that really give us the strongest indicator of how your culture is
Mm.
performing.
Yeah. So we've kind of laid out there's strong cultures, and just by virtue of contrast, there are then weak cultures. My question for you is there such a thing as a bad culture, or maybe even more specifically, is there such a thing as good values and bad values? Could we actually define it incorrectly or the wrong way?
I'm curious what you think of when you think about good or bad values. I think there are things that are the values we're promoting and living by, the ones that people feel really proud to show up for. Are they the values that motivate us in our human, at a human level, at a soul
Yeah.
level, versus some of the things that might be more, driving towards some of the more standard indicators of success, like money and customers and those kinds of things. Um, so I'm not sure that I would think of them necessarily as good or bad, but I would think of them as, are they things that truly motivate and inspire and drive people to show up and do a good job every day?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Now, within that, there's a couple that are pet peeves for me, like integrity or something. And so why is it that we feel such an intense pressure to pick certain values?
The ones that are, like, so like, honesty, integrity, some of the ones that are really
Yeah.
common. I think from, like, if I'm looking at it from a definition perspective, it does make sense. You want people who are going to show up and every day do what they say they're going to do and be honest about mistakes, or just really take that ownership and accountability. I think that the challenge with the words that we often use in our values is that we define them more as how they sound
Mm.
versus how they truly guide our behavior.
Well,
And then that makes them just kinda jargony,
yeah, yeah.
right?
So, I'll often ask folks a question like this if we're working on their values or something along those lines is, when's the last time you bonused your highest integrity sales rep?
Mhm.
Right, and I think it goes to that same thing. It's like, how does this change our behavior, right? How do we communicate this? Yes, but really, where are we celebrating it? What are we celebrating? What are we actually living out? Um, w and again, there's a lot of whys in this, but, like, why do you feel like it's so common to have that space between what we say and what we do?
So I think it's gonna sound simple, it's not that simple, but it's focus. It's intention. I think people know that it's important to have company values, or it's become a common practice to say, to have company values. But if you don't there is a really important intentional step then of
Mm.
defining, what does this look like in practice? What happens when we actually live this value? What happens when we don't? How do we hold ourselves accountable for it? How do
Yeah,
we celebrate it? So it takes a much deeper practice with the work to make it something that we actually show up for every day.
yeah,
And so I work with one company that they have their core values, and every quarter we do an exercise around, how did this value show up? Who lived it really strongly? What did that look like? And we share it to the team so that it's not just something that we did. It's an exercise I did with them to develop their values 7 years ago now.
wow,
And, I facilitate a quarterly all staff for them, and very frequently we're bringing it back up and we're saying, you know, tell me about a colleague who lived this value, and what did that look like? And we
yeah,
celebrate it. And that's
yeah,
how we start making it come to life.
yeah, I love that. So we've got a lot of founders who listen to the show, and I would argue, and I think they would too, that they've built at least a relatively strong culture. They've had some success in it. A lot of entrepreneurial startups, they're so close to the founder, right? That it's almost by immersion, right? That you kind of you get it or you don't. They hire people that they like and enjoy the natural alignment from that. Um, but you and I know that can't last forever. That can't scale indefinitely, is a better way of putting it. So when do you see that start to break down inside of an organization? What are some of the early warning signs?
Yeah. So I think we know there's actually quite a bit of research on when we start to kind of hit this tipping point, right? Where it's beyond the original founder CEO's reach to manage the whole culture. And that's somewhere between that 2025 person team. Once we get to that point, we just can't be quite as high touch with the whole organization and have our own energetic impact be what's leading the whole energy of the organization. And so that's about when we see it. I think when you start seeing employees really living differently from what your organization has originally created, when you start seeing this, the organization start to splinter. Right? Like, that's one thing I'll see is, like, a pocket of people and
Right.
start kinda going in a different direction or having maybe a pretty negative experience, and now they're chatting about it, but that energy is starting to spread.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing to look at. When you start seeing new hires not last very long, when people aren't lasting beyond that 90-day to 6-month mark, then you gotta say, like, "What's happening here?" The culture maybe is pretty strong with the original group that grew to 20, but now newcomers aren't feeling it, experiencing, getting embedded in it, and they're leaving. So those are probably the 2 key indicators I look at is when we start seeing that little bit of churn, especially with new hires, and when you start to see groups
Yeah.
splintering off.
Yeah. Y- Speaking of founder CEO, as I was researching the episode, I was surprised at how deep the linkage was between their own personal well-being and the strength of the culture. And I'm wondering if you could unpack that a little bit. Why is the CEO's personal health and well-being such an integral part of maintaining a strong culture?
Ooh, so strong, and I love that question. I think about, as in the army, like, there's a big old command and control culture, right? Like, you do as I say, there's a lot of structure around that. But I think very much of leadership and what we're seeing moving forward is this piece around personal impact. So I say, as a leader, instead of looking at ourselves from a top down, we need to look at ourselves as if we're like a drop in the water, right? And what is the ripple effect
Right.
that comes out from us? Our energy, what we have capacity for, how well we're able to regulate our nervous system to make really intentional choices about how we show up, how we communicate with our teams, how we solve problems. It is all directly impacted by our level of well being.
Well,
If I'm undernourished, if I am overstretched, if I am running on fumes, if I'm not sleeping,
yeah.
all of those things are going to have an impact on how much energy and capacity I have
Yeah.
to show up in a way that creates a positive impact on the team.
Yeah. It's so true. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting in a coaching session and I had a client on, again, most founder CEO types, and they'll be talking just, it's so hard this, it's so hard that. It's like, hey, when's the last time you had a good night's sleep? Like, did you eat a full breakfast? Like, when's the last time? And just nuts and bolts stuff like that. When you're hangry, you're not going to make a bunch of great decisions. And so, I was really surprised by that because I had done a lot of work on the kind of mechanics of organizations, and it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years that I've done a lot more one-on-one coaching, and
Mm.
I've just been struck at how big a role that plays. I actually started doing one-on-one coaching. You'll appreciate this because I saw that there were things that were undermining what we were doing as teams. It's simple stuff like this. It's behaviors and how they show up, but so much of that is rooted in some simple things like this. Um, have you found that that's true for other leaders inside an organization as well? And if so, if you're CEO and you see someone who seems to be struggling, how can you help them?
Yeah, I definitely see it at any level. I feel like right now, maybe it's always been this way, but especially right now, there's so much focus on how full everybody's plate is, right? And so I always tell people you lead from where you sit. So even if you're not managing a team, you're still having impact in an
Mhm.
organization and your energy is still creating impact on the people around you. And I think that it's really important to pay attention to our teams and where they're at with their stress, their capacity, looking at them from a whole human perspective. This is
Mhm.
where it starts to feel a little bit vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is a really important piece to grow and develop as leaders
Yeah.
because it is important to be able to say to somebody, how are you feeling? How are you doing? I work with one senior leadership team that they've actually started a practice of at their beginning of their meetings, everybody doing a stress check-in so that they have greater awareness of how everybody's doing and who might need some support,
Right.
how we can maybe shift the work to more, level it out, or at least just able to be there for each other in that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. I think it's important to be able to recognize that what's going on in our personal lives, it affects who we are as people.
Yeah.
And so being able to have some tolerance for that and some understanding of that is really important too.
Yeah. I love that, the idea of a stress check-in because, there's a couple of things there. One, it takes a significant amount of confidence even to say, "I have a lot. Yeah, I have too much. I need help." And also, one of the things I found with teams and why I love working in teams so much is, like, I may be completely maxed, but I can help you.
Mhm.
Right? Like, there's just an extra gear that we find in being able to help someone out, make a meaningful difference in their life, and instead, we often isolate around that, right? It's just, "I can't tell anyone, I'll let them all down," and we actually rob them of the opportunity to help us and the joy that that brings.
Mm.
So, what a great little exercise. What a fantastic I mean, it's not little in the sense that it does take some work, it takes effort, especially to do it over time, but just a simple, simple way of breaking that barrier. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, it's
Very
great.
cool. All right, so there's a question, Laura, that I like to ask all my guests, and I'm very intrigued to see what you have to say. The question is this: what would you say is the biggest secret that you wish wasn't a secret at all? What's that one thing you wish everybody watching or listening today knew?
Mm. I I wish everybody really embraced the power of the human connection inside of work, inside of our experience is that human capacity to connect with each other, to support each other,
Yeah.
to get to know each other. I think it's something that we've moved away from a bit in a lot of our environments and work, and I think it's amazing what happens when people share of themselves in a more personal way, not like in an appropriate, unboundaried way, but where we spend the time, take the time, make the time
Yeah.
to get to know each other and build that connection. It's so impactful for trust, for teamwork, for efficiency, all of the things we're striving toward. We can actually get more of that if we focus more on the human connection that makes it
Yeah.
all possible.
Yeah. That's so good. Laura, there's some folks listening, and just every word's resonated with them right where they are right now. They'd love some help. They'd love to find more out about you and the work that you do. Where can they find you?
Yeah. I would love for you to come visit me at laurabuckleycoaching.com. There's lots of ways in there to connect. You can reach out, set up a call and have a chat, sign up for my email list. There's a couple opportunities to connect right there.
Fantastic. We'll get that in the show notes. It is Laura Buckley, Buckley, coaching.com. Check it out. A great site, super simple, and just some fantastic resources there as well. So, highly recommend it. Laura, thanks for being on the show. It really was a privilege and honor having you here. And for those of you watching and listening today, you know your time and attention mean the world to us. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I know I did, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Take care.